Welcome to Healthy Buzz, the podcast for women who are craving honest answers in a supportive community. Hosted by Brandy Homerding, a certified nutrition therapy practitioner who believes your body isn't broken, but the narrative around women's health is. Each week, we're diving deep into holistic health topics, challenging the one-size-fits-all approach, and empowering you to trust your own informed intuition. Get ready to feel seen, supported, and seriously informed. This is Healthy Buzz, where collaboration meets unfiltered transparency in women's health. Hi, Healthy Buzz listeners. Today, we are marrying together two topics that I love to talk about. We're going to be talking about gut health and hormones. And for this conversation, I am joined by Amanda Dejak of Keeping Regular. Amanda started her journey in natural healthcare in 2009 after graduating as a registered holistic nutritionist from the Canadian School of Natural Nutrition. She immediately began working at the Center for Biological Medicine in Ontario, Canada. After working there for 5 years, it became very clear that there was a need to provide the patients with more resources for healthy detoxification. In 2014, she completed a certification program through Prime Pacific Health Innovations to be a colonic hydrotherapist. She then used skills she learned to run her own colonic business for 5 years. In that time, she worked with a lot of individuals dealing with cancer and Lyme disease. And it became her priority to make sure that every client got the necessary care and treatment needed for their unique circumstances. She is continuing to expand her interests and scope to understanding the field of detoxification. In recent years, she's received her certification in menstrual health consulting and lymphatic drainage massage. It is her focus to help you achieve your health goals. Amanda, welcome to today's show.
Thank you so much.
I am so excited to dive into this conversation with you and talk more in depth about everything gut health and hormone related. But before we do that, I would love to hear a little bit more about your journey, particularly like how did you get involved with the gut health side of things, particularly, thinking about lymphatic massage, colonics, all of that.
Since my teens, I've always been interested in finding a healthier way to live our lives. I won't elaborate and tell the whole story, but when I was in my early teens, my oldest sister developed brain and breast cancer. And she got rid of them all naturally. And a part of her process was doing colonics. So that's how we got introduced to it. And then after high school, I knew I wanted to study something that involved health and medicine and the human body. But I also didn't entirely like the idea of using always pharmaceuticals to try and cure things or help illnesses. So that's when I thought of studying natural nutrition. And ever since learning about nutrition, it also then opened up my mind to realizing how much the digestive tract is kind of overlooked. It's like where we take in things from the outside world, and it has such an effect on our entire system. And yet there's so many people that separate what we eat from everything else that's going on in our bodies. And so that started like kind of this, like, I kind of feel like I need to be an advocate for the intestines in some way, And then working with lots of different patients, working with that naturopathic doctor, and realizing like we can put all the good stuff in our bodies, but if we're exposed to so many toxins, I remember reading this book, I think it's called Death by Rubber Ducky. And it really opened my eyes up to like just how many toxins we're exposed to on a daily basis without even intentionally being exposed to them. For me, it just was clear, and I still like a principle I think is really important for longevity and health is detoxification is key. And so colonics made so much sense to me. And then as I've continued to learn, I was diagnosed with PCOS in my 20s, and the only option I was given was birth control from my doctor, but I didn't want to take birth control. So I worked with the doctor that I was working for, the naturopathic doctor. And so from that day, I have been doing natural things to help balance my hormones, and I've been pretty asymptomatic for the last 2 decades. And so that's kind of like where it all started. And now I'm just like any kind of detox I can learn about and help people with, that's what I want to be doing.
Yes, I love that. I love that you are an advocate for the intestines. What a great little slogan. I might steal that. I think that's so good. And also, I can really relate to that. Like, I'm a PCOS gal as well, and I had a very late diagnosis with it, but I've been able to manage my symptoms with that pretty well through diet, nutrition, movement, and things like that. So, having that focus also connects us. So, can you talk a little bit more about the word detoxification? Because I know that there's so many people who have heard of doing like these little fad detoxes, right? Like, I'm going to do this cleanse or I'm going to drink this detox tea and blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of like misconceptions around detox. Can you talk a little bit more about what that means?
Yeah, so when I'm talking about detox, what I'm referring to is stimulating any of the processes in the body that helps us eliminate biological toxins, which is like even just molecular functions produce some sort of byproducts that our body doesn't need and is not beneficial to the body if it stays there for very long. So when I'm talking about detox, I'm thinking about the parts of our body that we're using to get rid of waste, essentially, or things that can cause harm. So that's why when I think of detox, I'm talking about stimulating the liver and helping with getting rid of waste. So cleaning up the colon and stimulating your lymphatic system and sweating. So that's what I'm talking about. I don't think that there's necessarily one specific product that is going to help stimulate all systems. Like a lot of people will be like, oh, I've got this amazing tea, like you said, or I got this amazing supplement. But it involves a kind of a multi-leveled approach to how we can support our body's ability to get rid of waste.
Yeah, 100%. And our body is detoxing 24/7.
Yeah.
It's detoxing all the time. So, yeah, we want to support those detox pathways every day and things that we're doing every day. We can evolve that conversation a little bit more here, but I really want to jump into the conversation about how hormones and the digestive system are actually interconnected because many people think that they're very separate entities and there is no overlap or connection. So, can you explain about the connection between the two?
Yeah. So when I'm thinking about this, I'm specifically thinking about estrogen metabolizing in the body and how it gets processed through the body. So our estrogen will end up in our blood supply. It will go to our liver. Our liver then will perform phase one, phase two detoxification, and that's where the estrogen will be conjugated. So that means that the liver will attach, or the process will attach, a sugar molecule and a glucuronic acid molecule to the estrogen, which makes it inactive. And so now it's water soluble, the liver can get rid of it through bile, and then that dumps it into our intestinal system or our digestive system. And then in our digestive system, if our good bacteria is healthy and in the right balance, there's a group of bacteria that make up the estrobolome, always a fun word to say. And what the estrobolome produces, or what these bacteria produce, they produce an enzyme called beta-glucuronidase. And what that enzyme does when it comes in contact with this estrogen is it actually removes that glucuronic acid group, which makes the estrogen active again. And now our body can reabsorb that through the gut lining. It gets back into our blood supply. And now that's active, free estrogen that our body can use again. And so if we think about this, if our gut is in an unhealthy state, our bacteria is not in a proper balance, or another word for that is dysbiosis. So if we are in a state of dysbiosis, then that group of bacteria that's supposed to help with this estrogen, either like recycling or elimination, gets thrown off balance. And then we either end up reabsorbing too much estrogen, which can be a contributing factor to estrogen dominance, or we can be eliminating too much estrogen, which will start to feel the effects of not having enough estrogen in our system. So when we think of it, like it's such a connected part to our estrogen and our hormonal balance, just from that one aspect, because it's the final part of estrogen metabolism in our bodies.
That was a really great way of describing things. And so there's different tests that we can use to see how the body is metabolizing estrogen. One of those is the Dutch test that I know Amanda uses as well, in which we can see how is the body taking this estrogen, utilizing it. And then we have to get rid of things when we're done with it. We don't want them building up in our system. So we need to make sure that things can get out of the system just as freely. And that's why it's really important to make sure you're pooping every day, because we got to get rid of that
Yeah.
excess through our bile and our bowel movements. But most times, like hormone testing is fun and it's sexy and it's like, oh, this is cool. But we got to really look at what's happening in the gut, because if you're not pooping every day, if you're having a lot of dysbiosis symptoms, you're never going to be able to actually get rid of that estrogen appropriately if you don't work on those foundational things first.
Yeah, and that's why too I like that Dutch test because there's a part of it that does a bit of oat testing, so organic acid testing, and it gives you indicators as to whether or not there is dysbiosis happening. So you can also like see how the estrogen is being metabolized, but then also look and realize like, oh, this may be why things are off because you do have a bacterial imbalance in the gut. And then in addition to like that specifically working with estrogen, like you said, if things are off in the gut, then we're going to have a buildup of waste. We're going to have a buildup of toxins, and that can actually stress out the system. And the brain gut axis, so the vagus nerve that's always communicating between the gut and the brain, will then also be a little bit off, which then affects the HPA axis, which we know the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal gland axis, that if that gets thrown off, then that has a direct relationship with our sex hormone production. So again, there's quite a few different connections when it comes to how what's happening in our gut will affect overall hormones. We know too it changes with the menstrual cycle too, and throughout pregnancy. I can comment on those, but I don't know where you want to go first.
Yeah. There's so many good things that we are going to talk about here. So, first, I do want to back up real quick. And so, we did
Yeah.
talk about the Dutch test, and that's a really great test for hormones. Now, the other test that like I really like to run in my practice too is the GI map, in which then we can see what does the gut bacteria look like. Is there an overgrowth of opportunistic bacteria that then can increase that beta-glucuronidase that Amanda talked about? And when that beta-glucuronidase is elevated, it's breaking that bond between your hormone that you're trying to detox and the water molecule, and it's allowing that recirculation. Both those tests are really helpful, but it's very rare that I'm going to do a Dutch test on somebody if I haven't already done a GI map, because I'm really interested in what's happening in their gut first.
And that makes so much sense because before you can even start really working on someone's hormones, you have to work on their gut first, right? I mean, I remember in school, she kept on saying it's the low hanging fruit. You have to go to the end of the line and start from there. And so when it comes to eventually getting to all the different layers of working with your hormones, you have to look at what's the last part of the system, and that's the gut. So it makes sense to test what's going on with the gut first before you even start unraveling the rest of the issues.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to talk about the connection with stress. So we know that stress can do a doozy on our hormones, or maybe people don't know that. We can talk about that some more in depth. But how does chronic stress then also influence the gut microbiome?
So the presence of cortisol will start to affect the good bacteria in the gut. It can increases inflammation. It has a detrimental effect on the good bacteria. But also the presence of cortisol is letting your body know that you're in a stress state, which puts digestion on a back burner. And so as soon as digestion's on a back burner, then you're not producing as much stomach acid, you're not producing as much digestive enzymes, and you're not releasing as much bile. So all of those as well, when the digestive juices that you need to break down your food are not being produced, but you're probably still eating in many cases. And oftentimes when we're stressed, we're not eating the best foods. And when we have a lot of cortisol, we are craving sugar. We're eating as much as we normally would, perhaps. And if we're stressed, oftentimes we're not chewing as well. And so we don't have then the help of all the digestive juices. And then as a result, we end up having bigger food particles traveling through our digestive tract too, that our body can't fully break down because we don't have enough enzymes to break it down. And then you just have food fermenting in your large intestine. So now you've kind of got a compost heap instead of stool. And then that fermentation process is also really throwing off the environment for your good bacteria as well. So it's just kind of this like cascading effect from being in a high stress state chronically.
So how does somebody address that like stress? Because we can't get rid of stress. We all know that. But is there
Yeah.
something people can do specifically like when we think about mealtime hygiene and how we can really support digestion?
Yeah, so it's interesting because a lot of cultures and even, a decade ago or century ago, it was really common for everybody to pray before a meal or to take a moment before a meal. People aren't as religious anymore today, but that practice actually really helps with digestion. So whether you believe in God or not, it's an opportunity to stop, to kind of take a breath, to consciously change gears before you start eating. And even just looking at your food visually starts to encourage your body to produce more of those enzymes. And then being in a state of gratitude really does reduce stress as well. So, one of the things that you can do right before eating is to take a moment and to try and just reset your system for a little bit. And that doesn't take very long. That can be something that only takes 30 seconds, especially if you practice a couple of those calming breaths where your exhale is twice as long as your inhale. That can be something that someone does right away before they eat. But then also, there's obviously other practices to either eliminate or incorporate to try and stay in a more calm state regularly. So, like, put your phone away, turn the TV off, figure out ways to kind of just unwind before eating a meal.
Yes. And sit down, please. Please
Yes.
sit down. When you're running around the house, which I know, like, okay, I understand that a lot of times mealtime, if people have small kids, can be kind of chaotic. So it's trying to create maybe a little bit of a calmer environment where do we have everything at the table that we need to support everybody's digestion? Can we sit down? Can we chew our food? It's
Yeah.
so unsexy, I guess, like, but I think we've said this probably at almost every podcast episode that we talk about digestion and the gut health is you need to chew your food. Please chew
Yeah.
your food. It should take you like 20 minutes at least to eat a meal. If you're eating in like 10 minutes, 5 minutes, even 15 minutes is not long enough. You need to sit down, you need to chew your food, put your fork down between bites. And
Yeah.
that helps to alleviate some of the responsibility of your digestive tract to do all the work.
And actually, I know it's unpopular opinion, but until you can improve digestion, I would also encourage reducing the amount of raw foods. Like you can still have your fresh fruits and veggies in smoothie form, perhaps, but if you can reduce it down to maybe 20% of the fruits and vegetables that you eat, just until you can build up your digestive system, just because that raw, hard fiber is really hard to digest, especially if you aren't already experiencing optimal digestion. And if you know that you're in a stress state and if you kind of don't trust your chewing ability just yet, then that's another good thing too. Is just a lot of people think like, oh, but I'm having salads and they're so gassy. And it's like, well, it's just because it's having a hard time digesting and it's a lot of roughage for a system that's already inflamed.
Yeah. So even like sauteing your veggies or roasted veggies on a salad is so good too. Like maybe you still have your greens base, but you're having roasted or grilled veggies on top of it. Those are going to be a lot easier for your system and to digest than maybe the raw form.
Yeah, I love a good roasted eggplant and, some beets and carrots and sweet potato, especially this time of year. A nice warm salad is so good.
With a little goat cheese on there. Yes, calling my name, calling my
Yes.
name. So let's talk about something that gets thrown around a lot, and it's the term leaky gut. What does that actually mean? Is stress also adding to leaky gut?
Yeah, so leaky gut is when the cell junctions between the cells in the gut lining, that there's too much space between them. And so it's allowing for food to escape out of your intestines before it's ready and it goes into your bloodstream. That's now calling on your immune system to respond to that food as opposed to it just being digested through your digestive system. So it causes inflammation throughout the body. It can be the first step towards autoimmune diseases. It's linked to a lot of things now that they're starting to really research what's at the foundation of a lot of more serious illnesses. But that space between the cells is another byproduct of continuous stress, of high cortisol. You said it perfectly. Like it's all kind of linked, but that stress is another contributing factor to leaky gut.
So can somebody just take a supplement then to address the leaky gut? And is that going to solve their issues?
No. No, it's not that simple. We all wish it were, but it's not that simple. Yeah, and this is actually one of the reasons why I'm not taking so many nutritional clients anymore is because I find that people want a really quick fix. They've gone through 10 years, 5 years of issues that they finally are like, "Okay, fine, I'm going to go to a nutritionist and see what they can do." But there is this lack of commitment to knowing that to make a change requires lifestyle changes. And it doesn't just mean like, oh, I'm going to be off this food or I'm not going to do this for the next month and then I'm going to be right back on it right afterwards. Like when you're healing the body naturally, it takes longer. And then on top of that, there are certain things, unfortunately, that we just may never be able to enjoy without consequences. And so there's not a supplement for leaky gut. It really does involve taking a look at how to manage stress and how to simplify your diet while incorporating some things that can be really healing to the gut lining. Like I love slippery elm bark, aloe, marshmallow root, like all of those really nice kind of mucosalagen, fibers. Those are really good for the gut lining and they're going to help repair it, but it's not going to be the solution.
Yes. Okay. So a lot of things, so many good things to like unpack a little bit more here. So first, like a lot of times when people are coming to us with these digestive issues, like you said, they've been dealing with them for 5 years, 10 years, an extended amount of time. It's not something that they just had this problem overnight and they immediately reach out to us. That's typically not how this works, right? So we also have to remember that like it's not going to be a day, a night, 30 days before you see your results, this change and kind of start pivoting and having a different result. Usually, things that I've heard within our space, I don't know if you've heard this as well, like for however many years you've been dealing with those symptoms, it's going to take at least that many months to kind of
Yeah.
correct the imbalances that are going on. So, like, if we're saying like you've been dealing with your symptoms for, 10 years, you can be looking at like a 10-month healing journey, maybe longer.
Mhm. I tend to think too, I agree with that, and that's usually what I use. But if it's someone that's been dealing it with something for just about 2 years, 3 years, I tend to say 2 months for every year because 2 months goes by really
It
fast.
does. It
And
does.
2 years is a considerable amount of time to be dealing with something. So I like to extend that for like up until 5 years sometimes. I say almost 2 months. Also, because very rarely I'll say myself included, will I stick to something 100%. So that's giving that little bit of like unexpected things coming up in life. But, 2 months for every year, I tend to find that that can give a bit of perspective and proper expectations as to when you'll start seeing results.
I think
But I
I
do
like that
think you
better.
do start noticing some changes really quick, I find, especially when it's something that like somebody's very, very aware of. And if it's multiple symptoms, I do think you start noticing, and that's kind of encouraging to start noticing those little changes as you're going along.
Yes, I agree with all that. I think I'm going to start shifting that to like 2 months for every year because I think that's a little bit more realistic. Because even like when I'm thinking about like gut healing protocols that I'm recommending for my clients, so we are usually doing it in phases because we have to like build on the foundations first before we start like looking at eradication because your drainage pathways really need to
Yep.
be open. And I know this is something that you really put a lot of focus on. Can you tell us a little bit more about those drainage pathways, how we open them, and why it's important to have them open?
Yeah, so drainage pathways is colon, kidneys, lymph, and I'd say sweating is in there too, but pretty much you have to have the channels for your body to actually eliminate toxins open before you can start increasing your body's ability to process toxins. Perfect example. People will come in for a colonic or to clean out their colon when they're doing a juice fast. And a lot of people will come in by the end of their juice fast because they're like, I know I should be having some sort of bowel movements, but I actually haven't eaten anything for 4 days, 5 days. And then they come in for a colonic and there's a ton of waste in there. And they're like, okay, that's kind of crazy though, because I haven't really eaten in 5 days. But the thing is you've now just increased your body's ability to process toxins because it hasn't been using energy digesting food. So now you're increasing your body's toxin processing, sending them to your gut, where now it's just sitting there because any of the old waste wasn't cleared out. And so now you've processed those toxins and they've gone to a system that has been backed up. And so that sort of is where you want to do that colonic, or you want to open up your lymph or start sweating every day before you start increasing the actual processing of toxins, because they have to go somewhere and you don't want them to just go to somewhere else in your body and just sit there. So you want your body to be able to get rid of it all.
I love that. That's a very juicy take on that. Hey, Healthy Buzz community. Have you been curious about using a continuous glucose monitor to unlock powerful insights to your metabolic health? Imagine seeing in real time how your body responds to different meals, different workouts, and also the effects of stress. Now, what if you could experience those benefits without being locked into any type of recurring subscription like some of the other continuous glucose monitor programs out there? With my Blood Sugar Savvy course, you'll get exactly that. You'll receive access to 7 engaging learning modules, 2 continuous glucose monitors to start your wellness journey, plus 4 weekly one-on-one video strategy sessions with me where I'll personally guide you to understanding your CGM data. We'll work together to identify your unique blood sugar patterns and create customized strategies for better energy, mood, and overall well-being. Oh, and by the way, this is especially crucial during your peri- and postmenopausal years. Blood Sugar Savvy is about understanding your body on a deeper level, implementing practical strategies, and gaining sustainable knowledge to support your overall health and wellness. Ready to get Blood Sugar Savvy and take control of your metabolic health? Healthy Buzz listeners can save $30 simply by using the code BUZZ at checkout when you enroll at bcw.bcollectivewellness.com/Blood Sugar Savvy. That's bcw.bcollectivewellness.com/Blood Sugar Savvy. Don't forget to use that code BUZZ at checkout for your $30 savings. Your personalized blood sugar journey starts now. I want to hear your opinion on a juice cleanse.
Yeah, I think they're great. I encourage, if you aren't comfortable with colonics or you're not somewhere where you can access colonics, that you want to do something, even an enema or taking an herbal laxative or something for a couple of days before, to make sure that old toxins aren't just sitting there. And then when you do a juice fast, if you're only doing it for a few days, totally fine. But without that fiber, it is kind of hard to continue to eliminate because there's nothing to like make the bulk for your stool to keep moving. So usually if somebody is going to do a juice fast for numerous days, then I encourage enemas throughout the juice fast, or juice fast with one fiber drink. So that can be like your ground flaxseed and ground chia seeds and slippery elm or whatever, but making sure that you're still incorporating at least one beverage a day that has a high fiber in it so that it can produce the bulk to try and move those toxins out of your system every day. Because you don't want to be doing any kind of a cleanse that means you're not having a daily bowel movement. So love them, but just be super conscious of pooping every day. At least
I love
once.
the caveat. I love the caveat. Just like with everything in the health and wellness space, there's so much nuance to it that, sometimes people just hear, oh, Amanda said I should do a juice cleanse, and they forgot to listen to the rest of what you just said. So please use context, use nuance, and know that like you need to listen to all that she said, not just the one part that Amanda said to do a juice cleanse. It's fine. If you're pooping every day, it's fine.
Yeah.
Maybe you need to add some fiber in. Like, let's think about, everything that she said, not just a piece of what she said.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people underestimate how much stool they can have in their body without necessarily feeling full. And so sometimes someone will do a fast or a cleanse and they'll be like, oh, well, I pooped more than I normally did. So obviously I've cleared things out. But I think it's shocking sometimes for people how much is actually in their system. And so it's good. Obviously, it's always good if you're pooping more than normal, but it doesn't necessarily mean you've still cleared your system out. So imagine like having a full system, increasing detox, still having old waste sitting there, and then going back to your old way of eating while you still have old waste, detox waste, and now your new waste all still in your system, it's not sounding good. Because I'm sure it's not going
Nope.
to feel good,
Mm-mm.
you know?
Nope. You're going to feel
Yeah.
pretty crummy. This is also why, like, when I am helping clients with like an eradication protocol, let's say somebody has a parasite, we aren't eradicating that parasite until these detox pathways are open and they're pooping every day. Because if we try to push those eradication supplements on them and they're like backed up, they're going to feel awful. And
Yeah.
that's the last thing they want. They're just trying to overcome all these symptoms anyway. And then we throw more fire on this already fiery situation. You're going to feel like poop.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. And when people are doing something that's increasing detoxification, we're talking about like heavy metals, we're talking about old pharmaceuticals, we're talking about environmental toxins, glyphosates. Like these are serious things that your body has taken out of their little holding cells, oftentimes in your fat cells or different tissues. And now it's accessing that and trying to process that. And you don't want that now just sitting in your gut. You want to get rid of that. So 100%. Like we're talking about stuff that makes you feel really gross. You want to make sure that that's always moving out of the way.
Let's talk about the stigma around doing colonics and maybe enemas. And I know coffee enemas are a really controversial thing in the health and wellness space. Can we talk a little bit more about those?
Yeah, for sure. I think that coffee enemas oftentimes are controversial because of misguidance. I mean, all of those kinds of things I think are either wrongly being used or applied. So I'll start with coffee enemas. I think sometimes people don't take into consideration that there has to be a special kind of coffee that's being used and the equipment that they are using. So there's a difference between disposable and reusable enema equipment as well. So I think you can purchase plastic buckets, you can purchase plastic things. I don't really like plastic in general, but definitely if it's not something that's you're putting a warm liquid into that's supposed to be helping your body rid itself of toxins. So that's one thing. But people have used instant coffee or just normal drinking coffee, whereas there is a special kind of coffee that has to be used. It's tested for mold and fungus because coffee beans are very susceptible to mold and fungus. It's roasted so that it still has the phytonutrients in, so it's still a golden roast. It has an increase of palmitic acid, which is what will be the precursor to your glutathione in your liver. And again, I don't encourage coffee enemas until your colon is moving. And that's the other thing is a lot of people use coffee enemas as a way to increase bowel movements. You will have some stool come out and you will be stimulating your colon, but that's not what it should be used for because it's immediately going to increase glutathione production, which is going to increase toxin chemical processing by your liver. And then that's going to again be sent to your colon. So if you're dealing with constipation issues, you don't really want to be using coffee enemas as the way to move things along. If you're dealing with constipation, I would use like a saltwater enema. The difference between a colonic and an enema, the enema is using a finite amount of water, usually 1 or 2 liters of water. And a colonic has an indefinite supply of water because it's a machine that's connected to a water supply. And that's pretty much the biggest difference. Enema is really just clearing out your rectum, and then you have to sit on the toilet. Whereas a colonic has the ability to clean out the entire large intestine, and you can have waves of waste coming out and then putting water back in, and then waste coming out, where it's all happening within the tubing, and you don't have to keep getting up and off the bed and onto the toilet. But I think in all of those cases, it has to do with are you just using tap water in an enema or are you using filtered water? So all of those things should be considered before just jumping into any of the therapies. Is your colon hydrotherapist someone who's properly trained or is it someone who just did a weekend course? Like all of these are worth questioning. Are they using disposable tips or are they using reusable? Like those are all the things that lead to issues that make people question whether these therapies are good.
Who would be a candidate for a colonic?
Most people, other than if you're dealing with any kind of bowel inflammatory issues, but typically and most commonly is anyone dealing with any degree of constipation, anyone dealing with SIBO. It's a nice thing to kind of help ease the discomfort as you're working through that process of treating SIBO. And yeah, I would say constipation, anyone who's leading up to doing a cleanse, someone who's working on wanting to get rid of parasites. I've actually found for me, like I've never really had issues with constipation, but it's really helped me with, because I don't detox very well. Like I've done all my testing. So my MTHFR, COMT genes, they are not working very optimally. So I used to get really bad brain fog, and doing colonics regularly has kind of eliminated that. So I think it can benefit people even when they feel like digestive wise they're doing well.
That's very intriguing for sure. So, how would you say that maybe the colon health and the hormone health, how are they going to be interconnected here when we think about like maybe using a colonic? Is that improving maybe some hormonal symptoms that women could be experiencing throughout their cycle?
Yeah, so a lot of women find, and especially if someone deals with IBS, then they find these symptoms are highlighted even more during their cycle. But during women's luteal phase, when progesterone's high, a lot of women find they suffer from constipation. And that's because the progesterone's gone up high. Progesterone's a muscle relaxant, great for if you're pregnant, but that also, because the uterus is so close to the intestinal wall and the intestines, so hormones that are being useful in the uterus will affect the intestines. And so for a lot of women, that progesterone will now slow down the peristaltic contractions, and food will stay in their digestive system longer, which will lead to constipation. Also, during that time, a lot of women find they have more carb cravings, which tends to have less fiber as well. And so that can be another contributing factor. And then if you go into the actual bleeding part of your menstrual cycle, oftentimes people find that they'll then catch up and they have more diarrhea or a loose stool. But if you're going into that with a full colon, that increases the feeling of discomfort of the cramps and inflammation. So I do have clients that kind of time it to come in for colonics during their luteal phase so that they can kind of just not have to live with the discomfort of that constipation. That also helps reduce the cramping during their period.
Oh, that's really, really insightful. And I love that idea of like kind of doing the cleansing, the colonic prior to having your period, because it is something that we hear a lot is like the period poops where
Yeah.
stools are looser. Even like a couple of days, I have some clients who are like, oh, I have this like severe cramping, like rectal cramping that happens before my period. And then throughout their period, they can have really, really loose stools. And so, besides having the like maybe a fuller colon in the luteal phase because of slower peristalsis, is there anything else that contributes to maybe the looser stools that people experience during their period?
Yeah. So during their period, the looser stool is from the release of prostaglandins. They're like hormone like in the body, and they make the uterus contract so that you can shed your lining. They're higher inflammatory. They do affect the intestinal wall as well. And so they will make the colon contract more. So you're going to have more bowel movements because of that. But also, which I found really interesting, is a lot of women suffer from, because of the change in hormones and because of the demands on women's lives that doesn't necessarily shift with their hormone cycle, that women can feel increased anxiety and stress leading into their periods. And so that too, like that increase in stress and anxiety, can also be a contributing factor to kind of that loose stool. We've all had that, like, before a big presentation or something, we're just like, just got to go up diarrhea, I'll be right back, and so that can kind of, if you're dealing with like same kind of demands when your body really wishes that you could be resting, that can be a contributing factor as well.
So, are there any cycle syncing strategies that you recommend as like hormones are fluctuating and how that's impacting maybe the gut health?
Yeah, so I usually try to pay attention to where I am in my cycle. One thing is, if I start to notice a difference, things are moving a little bit slower and it is my luteal phase, I just try not to stress about it. I think it's women's nature to just be like, oh man, like, why have things shifted? So, like, if I know that it's my luteal phase and things aren't normal, I'm like, okay, don't worry about it. You're going to have your period and it's all going to come out. So, for one, don't stress about stuff that I don't need to. The other thing is, I know I get more sugar cravings, so I really try and keep that in check. In my normal diet, when I'm in control of my diet, I don't have grains. But I make sure I try and stay away from that during my luteal phase because that will really constipate. But I usually will try and eat a little bit more simply leading up to my cycle, drinking a lot of water, because even if things are going to take a little bit longer in my system, lots of electrolytes, magnesium, so magnesium rich foods, nuts, seeds, leafy greens, put those into smoothies. So I'm still having lots of nutrients and lots of food, but I'm just eating them in more simple forms. So I usually find I want bone broth, smoothies, soups, and I start supplementing with magnesium. I have lots of water. And then I find that helps at least a little bit with just not getting to the point where things feel like they're just heavy rocks sitting in your system.
Yeah. Can you tell us, what does a healthy poop look like?
Oh, good question. Well, one aspect of a healthy poop that I love is when you finish and you look back and you realize there's way more in the toilet than you thought. So that's one sign, is when it doesn't feel like you had to work a day's wage just to have something small come out. But a healthy poop is one that is light brown in color, or it could be dark as long as it makes sense with what you've eaten. So lighter brown in color, it keeps its shape even when it goes into the water. It doesn't just sink and disappear, but it's not floating either. And usually you find that you don't really need to wipe that much afterwards either. So those are like the perfect signs. You don't want to see undigested food in it. You don't want to see any oil on the top of the water. You don't want it too dark. You don't want it to be small pebbles. So yeah.
If your poops aren't looking like that, then you need to talk to us to figure out what's going on in your gut. Maybe we're doing some stool testing. Maybe you're getting a colonic, and understanding a little bit more about what your body is actually needing in the forms of support, or what's happening in your gut microbiome.
Yeah, exactly. And that's totally normal and fine for people to talk about their poo.
Yes. We've talked about parasites. We have a episode about like skin health and digestive health. I had a pelvic floor physical therapist on, and we talked a lot about like how you have healthy poops, not like forcing them. So yeah, we talk about poop here a lot on the Healthy Muzz.
I appreciate that.
Yes. So beyond procedures, how important is supporting the body's natural elimination and detoxification pathways going to support their health? Like, what are the non-negotiables for daily habits that clients can incorporate for keeping regular and supporting those detox pathways?
Yeah, so drinking water is a huge part of your
And
every
so
system in your
boring.
body.
I mean, everybody's like, oh, my assignment this week is to drink more water. I'm like, yes, that
Yeah.
is your
Yeah.
goal.
Yeah. And ideally filtered water. I know we have good water here on the West Coast. We do have good, water coming from our tap. That's something to be appreciative for, but it's still not that great. And when you think of how much water you're consuming, you want it to be as clean as possible. So filtered water, obviously sleep is really important to overall, and hormone health is really important. But when it comes to like nutrition, I would say nutritional diversity is something that our gut really needs. So that involves a lot of different foods, lots of living foods. So everyone has heard it at this point, but it's like grocery shop the perimeter of your grocery store. That should be the majority of where you're hanging out and getting your food. I'm a meat eater. I try my best to stick to like grass-fed, organic, even wild caught meat. That is usually what I stick to. But really paying attention to where your food is coming from, and can I make this myself? Like, are these ingredients I can easily access if I wanted to repeat this recipe for these crackers or whatever, But yeah, I think nutritional diversity is really important. I think it was Mindy Peltz. I did this with a few of my clients where I printed off a sheet, had 200 squares on it, and it was like every single time you eat a different food, spice, anything, write it down, because within a month, you want to be as close to 200 variety of things. Because a lot of us think we're eating different foods, but we're eating a lot of the same foods in different forms. This is like, when was the last time you went into a grocery store and picked up something you've never had before? Or when have you ever tried that tropical fruit that you don't know how to pronounce or something? But that's really important because you just don't know exactly what it is that will help your good bacteria to thrive. And it needs a variety of phytonutrients and prebiotics and fiber to be able to really thrive. And really that's the best way to get that balance back with your good bacteria. It's not really taking probiotics. It's diversity in our diets.
Yeah, I love that. I often will suggest to my clients, like, if you're usually having like red pepper in your egg scramble in the morning, maybe the next week you're having zucchini. Add something, try something different, mix it up and give your body variety, because those different foods are going to have different micronutrients, and it's going to provide different prebiotics for our bacteria in our gut. So, this is a really important question that I just thought of. Probiotics and prebiotics. Let's talk about those. What are your thoughts on those?
I think that I'm not a huge pusher of probiotics. I think prebiotics are easier because it's not a living organism. Like prebiotics usually just the fibers and so like that you can consume and you can take and it's going to stay in its form. I'm not so trustworthy that all probiotics have the survivability that they want to have. Like I used to always be like, oh, only buy the probiotics that are in the fridge because they're, those are the ones that are still alive. But then I'm like, but if it can't even survive room temperature, how is it going to survive your stomach acid and the journey down your digestive tract? So I'm no longer really a fan of refrigerated probiotics anymore. I do think that when you're taking a probiotic that really works for you, you should notice a difference in your gut. Like it may not be right away, but there are two different probiotics that I've taken where I've noticed like, oh, at first I felt a little bit gassy for a couple of days, which they say on the label that is something that can happen. And then I did notice a difference and improvement in the nature of my stool. And I was like, okay, this is good. But there's a lot of probiotics that you can be taking and you don't notice a difference at all. So I think unless there is a specific strain that whoever you're working with really wants you to try and increase, and even if you're not getting the full amount that the bottle says, even if you're just getting a little bit, then great. And I am also a fan of also doing some probiotics as a suppository, because then it's actually, if you're trying to repopulate your large intestine, it's actually getting right there without having to survive the whole tract. But yeah, that's sort of I think fermented foods is more of a viable, survivable source of probiotics, in my opinion.
Yeah, I love it. Again, it's nuance, but I will tell you, this is just my opinion, but if you're
Yeah.
buying your probiotics at Walgreens or Costco or on Amazon, mm, I am going to say that they probably are not good quality probiotics. So
Yeah.
we really want to look for brands that do like some very specific testing, that they follow the good practices, and that we feel pretty confident are delivering what they actually say they're delivering on their bottles.
Yeah, and there's a brand in the States, it's Microbiome Labs, they make the Megaspore.
Hmm. Hmm.
So it's the probiotic in the spore stage. Yeah, that's one of the probiotics that I'm like, yeah, when I take this, I notice a difference because they're keeping it in that stage so that they can mature when they get into your system. Like they will survive. So yeah, I think like you said, you have to have done your research, understand that this company is actually dedicated to producing a real product. And oftentimes I find that the companies who make the best probiotics, they kind of only stay in the gut realm. Like they're
Hmm.
not making something for everything. They're not out there doing everything because they're actually focused on what is important to them.
Yep. And I was like too that if you're taking a probiotic, I think it's important to rotate through a couple different ones. So I have a couple different brands that I really like. And sometimes I'll have a client do a spore-based probiotic, and then I'll have them do another just general probiotic, like alternating between a bottle of those, just to help with increasing that diversity if there's somebody who does need, a little additional support in their gut microbiome with that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that you never know what is going to really connect with what's happening in your environment. So it's nice to have that diverse, like to introduce different strains of bacteria because you don't know which one your body is actually going to like grow the best.
Yep, exactly. Well, this was a really fun conversation. We married some of the really things that I love talking about with my clients all day long. And it's been really fun to talk with you a little bit more about this. So, is there any last parting words that you want to give to our clients today or to our listeners today? They could be our clients.
I guess my one thing would just be to remember that each system isn't independent from the other, and that our whole body is always working together and all the systems kind of support or affect one another. And so, yeah, if you're trying to focus on hormones, it's not just looking at your reproductive system. You have to look at everything. And as embarrassing and perhaps you were raised as impolite as you think talking about your poo is, sure, you don't have to talk about it with everybody, and it doesn't have to be a dinner table conversation, but it is important that you do talk about it with somebody because it's a huge indicator of what's going on with your overall health. So I would say remember your whole body's interconnected and normalize poo talk.
100%. We are here for it. If you need somebody to talk to about your poo, Amanda and I, our DMs are open. So how can people connect with you? How can they find you?
Yeah, so the best way is probably through my Instagram. It's at keeping_regular. And that is the best way to connect with me personally. So if there's ever anything that comes up, if you want to talk about poo and no one in your family wants to hear it, let me know. And then also I am working out of 2 clinics in Vancouver, Canada. So I work out of Inner Garden Health doing colonics and Fit to Train doing lymphatic drainage massage. But yeah, even if they're interested in either of those, you can just DM me and I can connect you wherever you want to.
If you don't live in Vancouver and you have questions about like, hey, what should I be looking for when seeking out somebody to help me with the colonic, I'm sure Amanda could help guide you with that information.
Yeah, more than happy to.
Well, this was amazing. Thank you so much for being here today, and we will talk with you soon.
Thank you. This was so fun.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Healthy Buzz. I hope this conversation has left you feeling seen, supported, and ready to take the next step in your health journey. Love what you heard? Make sure you subscribe to Healthy Buzz so you never miss an honest conversation. And if you found this valuable, please take a moment to leave a review. I truly appreciate it. For exclusive weekly tips and holistic strategies, be sure to subscribe to my weekly newsletter. The link is in the show notes. Remember, this isn't just nutrition, it's permission to trust your body. I'll catch you on the next episode of Healthy Buzz.